Live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are streaming via YouTube. If you got any questions for me and my guests, please enter them into the comment box, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end. You guys know my email address, zach@zachballinger.com. You can email questions before the show. We'll make sure to ask any guests that we have on. Without further ado, Tom, thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
Zach, happy to be here.
So, Tom, I just want to jump right in. So, what is your exact title? What is your career, or what was your career, and what do you do now?
Well, technically, I'm retired, but I'm anything but retired right now. But my career was spent in Olympic sport, and I worked in the communications area. And it just had been a passion of mine to work in sport, in particular in skiing, and snowboarding went with that. So I spent over 30 years working professionally in that career and retired a few years ago. And now I'm active as an independent consultant, doing pretty much the same work, but for a lot of different types of Olympic sports, whereas previously in my professional career, I worked in skiing and snowboarding.
And so, people are probably sitting out there and being like, wait a minute, somebody can actually make a living covering the Olympics. How did you learn about this type of career? Like, what did you do on a daily basis?
Well, let's first talk about how I got into this. And I think it's an interesting story, and whether it applies to you wanting to pursue working in Olympic sport or becoming a school teacher or whatever it is, the steps are really all the same. And for me, I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. Today I live in Park City, Utah. But in Madison, I had no idea what skiing was. There were a lot of ski areas around, but my family wasn't involved in that. But when I was 7 years old, Mom needed to go to the grocery store. So she put me on the couch, turned the television on, and said, "Don't move." And I just stayed right there as a 7-year-old, and I watched the Olympics from Squaw Valley, California, back in 1960. And I distinctly remember this. I remember watching Penny Patu from New Hampshire come down and win the silver medal in the downhill. And just as a kid, it just really captured me. The speed, the excitement, the outdoors, the mountains, the snow. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I want to do. I didn't know how to do it, but through my life, I found these little steps that I could take that eventually led me to a career there.
So can you expand on those little steps? Began, you begin investigating this, you found out this was a passion of yours, and then you decided to turn it into a career. What was some of those steps that you could share with us?
Well, I think one of the things that I really want to stress is you should do what you want to do and enjoy and have fun at. And I'm one of those people that says I've never worked a day in my life because I've always just enjoyed what I'm doing. So I look to connect things together. So the first thing I did in high school, so this is 5 or 6 years later, I still hadn't been very connected to skiing. Mom and Dad would take us out to the ski jump every January west of Madison, and we would watch the ski jumpers. But then I got into photography, and I started to think, how could I combine photography with this interest I have in skiing? So I went out to the ski jump, and instead of being a spectator, I became a photographer in high school, and I took photographs of ski jumpers. And that was kind of like starting to get into my passion, or what I perceived as my passion at the time. And then when I got into college, I was a journalism student at this point, pursuing a career in photography at that moment in time, which was also a pretty amazing career. I was a news and sports photographer for several daily newspapers in Madison and several magazines. But I started to parlay the interest in skiing with my ability to write. And I got a part-time gig at a PR agency that had several ski area clients. So I started writing news releases and stories about ski areas. And one of them was the Telemark ski area in northern Wisconsin, home of the famous American Birkebeiner cross-country ski race. So I became a publicist for them and eventually got a job there. And in that role, I started to meet people from the U.S. national ski team. I started to get connected to the Olympics. I started to become known a little bit within, at this point, cross-country skiing. And I had an opportunity to work at the Olympics in Lake Placid in 1980. So it's all of these little steps, and I just continue to progress them. Every one of them was doable. And I think a lot of people get a bit fearful that this goal is so far out there that you'll never get there. But like any goal, if you take it one little step at a time, you're going to achieve it. You can achieve anything you want.
Tom, if I go out for vacation, I'm going to have you fill in on the show.
Happy to.
We seem to share a lot of the same themes. So, you talked about this career journey. Did you have any setbacks? A lot of the times when I talk to professionals that have had a successful career in their mind, they can look back at one thing and say, wow, I can't believe this happened to me, and I was able to overcome it. Can you remember anything like that along your career?
The point you're making here is really important, because you can't have success without failure. I couldn't honestly point to anything in my job path and say, wow, I really had to overcome this to continue on in my job path. But there were plenty of things that just happened day to day that you have to overcome to continue to be successful. But I think I was fortunate in a ways, because I never really lost any steps in my job path. I was never terminated from a job. In fact, in all honesty, I don't know that I've ever really quit a job until I retired. I mean, this back so much, but one situation I will recount. When I worked for the newspapers in Madison back in 1977, we had a newspaper strike. And I was not supportive of it, but I also wasn't going to cross the picket line. So I was out marching with the banners and on the strike line for some time. And we ultimately all lost our jobs out of that strike. I never took that, though, as being a setback. For me, that was an opportunity to do something new and different. I would have stayed there and I would have been a highly successful photographer, I'm sure of that. But this gave me an opportunity to try something new and kind of be forced into it. So it's a little bit of a different answer, but it's something important to take advantage of those opportunities you are given. And I'll tell you, too, there's a lot of people who I've seen who have left a job or lost a job, fired from a job, whatever the case might be, laid off. And I've always admired the people who have been able to use that as an opportunity. One of the things, I'm diverging a bit here, but as a manager, one of the things that I am most proud of is that I've had hundreds and hundreds of people work for me over the years. Some of them, for whatever reason, didn't continue to work for me, whether they were laid off or whatever the situation was. I always made it a point to stay in touch with them, follow their career, help them with their career. And, you're going to have changes in your job cycle over time. I don't think you should worry about it too much. Just use those as an opportunity and as a catalyst to do something new.
Wow. Great advice. And so you've had a unique career path. Obviously, you start out photography, publicist, and then getting into the Olympics, covering that. You've had kind of an outside of the norm career path, but you said you never had to work really a day in your life. Let's expand on that. So I know there's a lot of peer pressure from parents. I hear it from students all the time that a student may have an obscure path. They may be passionate about something. For example, somebody might be passionate about being an actor or being in choreography or whatever. Did you meet any resistance to the career path you had from friends or family members in your life when you mentioned, hey, I'm going to go do this? And if you did, how did you fend that off and just continue to do what you wanted to do?
It's a really interesting point, Zach. I didn't have any problem with any of the changes I made. I think probably to a certain degree, I'm guessing, and I can't remember it distinctly, but I suspect that my mother back in 1977 probably wasn't too keen on me taking a step to not cross the picket line and potentially lose that job. But, honestly, it was never really a big deal. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. You just have to use those situations as opportunities. I also stuck with a career for a long time, and I'm not sure that I would counsel people today to stay on a job as long as I did. I worked for one company for 32 years. That's a long time. I'm not sure that's the best thing for everyone. It worked well for me, but I also look now that I'm in private business for myself and doing my own consulting. And I knew I would say this, but I say to myself now, I should have done that move a long time ago, but I didn't. I stuck with it, and it worked out to be a good choice for me.
Yeah, and I think in my book I talk about that, the generational work gaps, and then the average millennial now changes jobs every 3 years, and it's just a trend that's going on in the marketplace. A lot of things happen for different reasons, and it doesn't mean that's bad. It's some people get promoted into different levels that people are being promoted faster and faster, or other opportunities arise, or we get bored at something. We can find our passion in different ways. So let's talk about your career now in this consulting role. What do you do? I'm going to circle back to this Encore thing that you mentioned, because I think that's important. But what do you do now? What does your job look like as this consultant? What are some of the daily activities that you do?
So I gained a fair amount of knowledge and a large network of individuals and organizations, same business for quite a few years. My work was pretty much focused in skiing and snowboarding. I worked for U.S. Ski and Snowboard, what's called the national governing body for Olympic skiing and snowboarding in America. I had a lot of connectivity internationally with the International Ski Federation. I had a lot of connectivity with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So I had all of these connections, but I wanted to broaden my wings a little bit, and in particular, focus on smaller sports that didn't have the resources and opportunities to have a communications strategist working with them. So now I work with a lot of smaller sports. I work with sports like speed skating, biathlon, ski jumping, and others. And I also continue to work, and even more broadly, within the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic world. That has been very gratifying to me. And I made a few commitments to myself when I left my job, that I wanted to do things that I enjoyed, working with people who I enjoyed working with, who valued my knowledge and respected what I could provide the organization. And if I don't have those items, I'm not going to do it. I'm not in this for money. I get paid for what I do, and I'm able to make a good living at it, but that's not my primary motivator. I want to make sure that I have a good relationship. When you have a job and you're working for an employer, you kind of need to one that comes into your world. That's just a part of having a job. As an independent consultant, I can make those choices now as to who I choose to work with and where I want to spend my time. And that's been personally very gratifying for me the last couple of years.
And so, if someone's, looking at Tom's career right now, and they say, what does Tom do on a daily basis? What does that look like? And, everybody has the answer, because it changes for me every day. But what's a typical day look like for you?
Well, it's a whole lot different than it was 8 or 9 months ago. I can tell you that. Right now, and I was well suited, I think, when the pandemic came around and everybody's world changed. I always have enjoyed working electronically, but in my first couple of years since retirement, I spent a lot of time going to client offices, particularly going to coffee shops and networking there, just feeling I kind of had to be out and about. But when the pandemic hit and we couldn't do those things anymore, I just adapted my office a little bit. I upgraded some of my equipment, so I was better suited to work online. And now I do a lot of podcasts for clients. I do a lot of online panel moderation. So a typical gig for me might be having 3 or 4 Olympic athletes on a screen, and I'm moderating a discussion with them with maybe donors to a particular sport, or much like you do, Zach, doing motivational and educational work online. And it's worked out really well. My office, my studio is right in my home, and it just gives me a lot more flexibility, and it's so much more efficient than what I used to do. So I think when we come out of the pandemic, I don't think my world will change all that much. It will be nice to go out to a lunch once in a while with someone, but for the time being, my work is managed online, and it's working really well.
Awesome. And let's talk about this Encore stuff. So, I talked to a lot of people in my book. I used to go to a lot of different nonprofit organizations with retired individuals. And remember that vaguely, Dennis came up to me after one of my talks, and he's 67 years old. And, I always tell people to live and find a career that they love and be passionate about it. And he said, well, looks like you're too late for me. And, and then another person came up to me, Doug, who had a different mindset, and he was actually a little bit older. And he said, hey, I'm ready for this Encore stuff. I'm excited. Here's what I want to do. I want to run this by you, Zach, see what you think. What, just talk to me about an Encore career. Why do you think that people at 65, when they're done, they just should go and sit around and fish all day? Or what does that look like?
If they want to. I love to fish, but I'm not going to do that all day. One of the paradigms, my wife, who is actually 10 years older than I, we share this philosophy that we don't look at age as a limiter. We don't talk about age. We don't kind of get into the rut of, I'm really feeling old today or any of that. That's just not us. We don't do that. We're still active. We get out and hike and bike and ice ski 60 days a year. And so we stay very, very active. And I think a lot of it is your mental approach to it. If you're reaching a particular age that you feel is an age that things change, then they're probably going to change. But if you throw age out the window and just continue to conduct your life the way you want to conduct your life, you're going to enjoy a lot more years. And I think for Encore performance, from a work perspective, it's the same thing. Now, I will tell you that I probably am working more now than I was when I was employed. Hard to really gauge that. But what I do have now is I do have more flexibility. I will also, one other caveat to that, when you work for one employer, you generally work for one employer, and maybe your departments in that company are your clients. You can, when you work in one company, you can kind of play one department off the other. But when you're an independent contractor and a consultant and you have 8 or 10 clients, one client doesn't care about the other client. They just care about themselves. So you now have to work in a world where every client needs to feel like they're getting your full attention. That's one balancing act that has been a bit of a challenge, but I enjoy that. And I enjoy the concept of making all of them feel like they're the number one priority that day.
So awesome. And, I completely agree with you about the age thing. I love your story and how you're so excited about your Encore career. And you're right. When you love your job, you're going to tend to work more, to be quite frank, because guess what? You love to do it. So, yeah. I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's a hard paradigm for a lot of people to learn. Talk to me about the role of networking in your career. How important do you think networking is for professionals or entry-level people or even students that are rising up through the ranks?
It's the absolute number one thing you can do. And I don't care what your career is. If you want to advance in it, you have to build a network. And it's fascinating because I never really thought so much about that. My dad was a good personal networker. He just went out and met people. I always had a hard time with that. So as I built my career, I just made it a point to keep track of people and keep a good contact database. I also, and this is funny because when I was working for US Ski and Snowboard, I was pretty active on LinkedIn, but I wasn't strategically active. It was kind of the thing that if I was in an airport, I'd say, okay, let me pick up 20 new connections today. And that's how I used LinkedIn. But when I became a private consultant, I saw LinkedIn as my really priority place for expanding my network. And I participated more strategically in it. I shared relevant content more frequently. I created original content more frequently. And I used that as my networking base. My number one fear when I left in 2018 from US Ski and Snowboard after 32 years was, what's going to happen to my network? And I really felt I had a few years and that network was going to go down. The absolute opposite has happened. My network has expanded so much in that time. I've worked it, and I've also learned that I actually had a bigger network than I really gave myself credit for. I had people who knew me who I didn't really understand that they knew me. And LinkedIn is a great platform because if you play it right, you can kind of make anybody like your best buddy, your best contact in how you approach them. And you need to go in with a sense of familiarity and learn about people. And I found LinkedIn to be an amazing platform for me the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter in my book on LinkedIn because that's really the way you can organize all your professional network right there in one stop shop. And, when I grew up, we didn't have anything like that. So, guess what you had to do? You had to actually go out and talk to people. And you'd have to remember people, before the cell phones, you'd had to have a Rolodex, they called it, of contacts that you'd have. And LinkedIn really makes that an easy process. So I did have some questions that come in. I did want to get to them. Student writes in, says they're introverted, they're shy, and the thought of meeting people or networking scares them. How do you overcome that fear?
Well, that was me. I couldn't tell you the silver bullet that really made a difference. And my sisters and I were just joking about this. Our mother and father were incredibly outgoing. We didn't like that. We felt we kind of needed our privacy. Why are mom and dad talking to that person over there? We don't know that person. And I don't think that I reached that point for many, many years. So I don't have any silver bullet, but I will tell you, people want to get to know you. Here's something that I would tell our athletes. And I did a lot of media training with our national team athletes. And I said, you should have that 30 or 60-second elevator pitch, to call it something, ready, because you never know when you're going to meet someone and everyone is interested in you. So if you're sitting next to someone on an airplane, maybe you want to get some work done, but absolutely say hello to that person and just see if there's a connection. I'm in skiing. The chairlift is an amazing 4 to 6 minute place to meet someone. So you just need to take advantage of those opportunities. A simple hello, how are you today? It may open up a door. It might not, but it might. And I always make it a point whenever I'm with someone, someone that I make eye contact with on a plane or a bus or a train, to just say, hey, how you doing today? Are you having a good day? Much like you did when we started this interview. So I just encourage people to don't be bashful about saying hi to people. It's a little harder right now during COVID because we can't really do that. But don't be bashful and don't think that you can't reach out to that person. And be it on LinkedIn or whatever the medium is, don't fear reaching out to someone.
And then somebody else writes in, did you work more during the Olympic years than in the time off between them?
For sure. We were cyclical based on the Olympics. So our entire planning system was Olympic oriented. So we were very definitely a quadrennial type organization. And Olympics were amazing events. You run on adrenaline. It's 17 days of absolute high-paced action. I loved doing that, and I was good at doing that, and I was good at managing things under those very intense circumstances. And then after that, you have a letdown, and those are sometimes hard. And in an organization, it's when people tend to leave. So you have a lot of transition that happens under that. But very definitely, our entire lives were geared around that 4-year cycle. And also, being in a sport that was winter oriented, we were also very cyclical to winter. So my kind of, call it November through March, was way more intense than it would be in the summer months. So I just got used to that. I also have, in virtually my entire life, I've been in jobs where weekends were no different than weekdays. So I never really developed the concept of it's the weekend and you're off. Because in the Olympic competition business, year in and year out, that's when our competitions were held. I also had the added I don't know if I'd call it a problem or challenge or whatever, but we were a very Eurocentric sport. So skiing takes place in Europe more than it takes place in America. So my days were also very oriented towards the European clock. So my days typically on Saturdays and Sundays, it was kind of up at 2 a.m. Mountain Time and work. It's just when the competitions were held. So I got used to that. And I never was one for an 8 to 5 environment and I never worked that way. So I don't even really know what that's like.
Awesome. And next question comes in, not really career oriented, but we'll take it because I find it fascinating too. It says, what was the most amazing thing that you witnessed as far as an athlete's performance during the Olympics?
This is a great question. And I have to say for 32 years, I couldn't answer this question. I would come up with this list of, well, here's 8 or 10 really amazing things. I've been in the finish line at the Olympics for 75 U.S. ski and snowboard medals. And that's a lot of athletes. And it's Bode Miller, it's Hannah Carney, it's Lindsey Vonn, it's Michaela Schifrin. It's a whole host of amazing individuals. But I grew up in the early days in sport working in cross-country skiing. And in cross country, there had only been one U.S. medal, and that came in 1976 with a Vermonter by the name of Bill Koch. And I knew Bill, and I was actually working with him at the time. I wasn't at that Olympics, but it was a memorable thing. But cross country waited like decades and decades before the next medal came. And every Olympics, we would go there and think, oh, we're going to get the medal. So 2018 in South Korea, we felt we had some really good opportunities with Jessie Diggins and a number of others. And we'd gone through the first few events and we'd done very well, but we hadn't hit the medals. So there was an event called the Team 2-person event. Jessie Diggins and Keegan Randall, who was the real veteran, were paired up in that. And we were pretty confident. We were pretty confident that we had a chance at a medal that day. They'd won a medal at the World Championships the year before. They had won the gold medal 4 or 5 years earlier at the World Championships. So we knew we had an opportunity. So I was looking forward to that night to celebrate, hopefully, the first cross-country medal in many, many years. And they came through, but they didn't just win a medal, they won the race. And that was never, ever really a thought as we went there that day. But to be literally 7 or 8 feet from Jessie Diggins when she crossed the finish line in Pyeongchang, and I still get emotional when I think about it, but to have been a part of that athlete's career and to have helped them and help prepare them and help them to tell their story and to be right there when that piece of history was made, nothing will ever top that for me. And I've seen things. I was there for Lindsey Vonn's gold medal and Bode Miller's medals and for Hannah Carney's Moguls gold medal in 2010 and many, many others, but nothing will ever top Keegan Randall and Jessie Diggins winning the team sprint and cross country in Pyeongchang in 2018.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if anybody out there wants to follow your work or is interested in connecting with you, what is the best social media platform or website that they could get in touch with you through?
The best platform for me, it really is LinkedIn, and I accept almost any connection. So there are very few I turn down. So just go to LinkedIn and look me up, Tom Kelly, and I should be pretty easy to find. I'm pretty active there. I maintain a personal profile on Facebook, and you can find me there. And I'm also on Twitter at Tom Kelly Olympic.
And we'll make sure to attach your LinkedIn profile for people out there that are interested and want to connect you through there. Guys, this is a great opportunity. You know, a lot of people say, you know, I'm shy on LinkedIn and I don't know who to connect with. Right now, Tom and I are giving you that opportunity to connect with us. Same way I connect with most everybody I come into, unless they're trying to sell me something.
Those are the ones I don't.
Yeah. So as long as me and Tom both are willing to do that, there's a great opportunity. Tom, thank you for offering my audience that. This has been a real pleasure. There's a lot of great nuggets people can take from our conversation today that you've offered as far as your feedback, your career, your journey, and your advice. We know you're very busy, so we certainly do appreciate your time.
Well, this has been fun, Zach. I really admire what you're doing to bring this information to so many. And as I said earlier, just follow your heart, follow your dream. I never had a strategic plan to end up in this, but I did have a passion, and I just kept following it little by little. And it provided me with what I tell people was the absolute best job any in the world.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate the advice. Have a great
Thanks, Zach.
day.